All right. Good morning, folks, and welcome to the Gentle Parents Unite group coaching session. I want to talk a little bit this morning about um, boundaries and children having boundaries. It's a incredibly interesting. Hey, Boo Boo, how you do? Good, good. Good morning. So it's an incredibly interesting paradigm. I find that in the parenting discussion, in the parenting world, everybody, everywhere, parents and parenting professionals alike are saying children need boundaries to thrive. Children need boundaries. If we don't set boundaries, then XYZ, the whole world is basically going to just like fall apart. Now, I'm not saying that people, children included, and people don't need boundaries. Boundaries actually have a tendency to keep us pretty safe. Um, However, what I want to suggest is that the word boundary has become synonymous with the word rule in parenting, in the parenting world, and anything that the parent decides that they want it this way becomes the boundary. um so around boundaries, um first of all, I think that boundaries are really, really important. We should all, regardless of age, be able to say no. We should all be able to say, I don't like this thing. I don't want to do this thing. And have somebody interact with that respectfully. Have somebody interact with that with the knowledge that they're pushing on a discomfort point for you, and that might not be the healthiest thing, right? And that includes children. But the aspect of children's, well, there's a couple aspects of children's boundaries that I want to talk about this morning. And one of the big aspects of children's boundaries that I wanted to address today is that when a child tells us no and we use force or mainstream concepts, like, just for example, um, your child says they don't want to go to Thanksgiving dinner at grandma's house. And you override that by telling them that they're being rude, that they're, um, that they have to go because it's a family event. And not only do they have to go, but, when they get there, they're not going to be on their devices and they need to say hi to grandma. And, don't be rude to any of the family members, even if those family members make you uncomfortable for XYZ reason, right? And, when we override a child's boundary with zero acknowledgement that they set a boundary and tell them what they're going to do and how they're going to do it, and we don't hear their concerns about why they don't want to go to grandma's for Thanksgiving dinner, why they feel uncomfortable there, why they don't want to engage in all of these different activities with the family. Um, it's actually, it's so huge. It's so huge. One, it really plays into that child as they get older, losing their ability to speak up for themselves in these situations when they don't want to do the thing. And little by little, they start to feel like their boundaries are invalid. And as they grow, it makes it harder and harder for them to set boundaries. Like as adults, boundary setting is hard for us by design, by this exact design that we aren't acknowledging that children have boundaries. And here's the other thing, it really plays into autonomy. And we know that when we're not respecting the autonomy of children, we are absolutely upholding the status quo with rape culture. And it leads to, when we don't listen to somebody when they tell us no, it leads to the word no losing its impact. And the word no should have, well, I don't want to should, but the word no does carry a lot of incredibly important impact. The word no is like a huge part of our language that helps to keep us safe. And we want to empower our children around the word no. We want our children to feel strong and comfortable when they say no. We don't want our children to feel as if they're back talking us or in some way being a problem or burdensome or a trouble, right? Like and here's the thing, when we disregard no ourselves as a less than thing, that is the exact message we're sending around that word. And in my house, when my child tells me no, I thank them. When they say they don't want to do something, sometimes I'll explore it. I mean, and it is good to explore. However, exploration doesn't necessarily mean that we're pushing. So, if kiddo says, I don't want to go to grandma's for Thanksgiving, we could explore that as in, oh, wow, really? Why? And get the information. But that doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to push on the boundary and say why, and then use that information to try and coerce them into doing something they don't want to do. Um, of course, there could be some collaboration around it with us holding ourselves accountable for not forcing an outcome in the conversation or not being completely invested in the outcome of the conversation, really hearing somebody out from one side to the other and then collaborating solutions. If a kid doesn't want to go to grandma's house, um, even if they just wanted to play on their device because it's a day off and it's a holiday and they just wanted to stay home, that would be as valid a reason as if, people at grandma's house were mean to them or made them uncomfortable, right? Because it's a day off and it's a holiday, and like spending a holiday the way that feels good to us is exactly what we're going to do as adults. Um, so then maybe we could collaborate with them. We could find ways to, help accommodate their need for the day. Sometimes that's not possible. Like sometimes we're just, well, we're always just one person. Sometimes as just one person with not a lot of support or whatever your lifestyle is, your situations are. Um, you know, Sometimes we can find ways to collaborate within that structure and to help honor them. And when we do that, we're teaching our children that setting a boundary for themselves, doing something that they want, staying out of a situation that's uncomfortable, whatever that is, we're sending them the message that that is a valid choice for them to make. And as adults, we want our children, and as children, we want our children to be able to make empowered decisions about what feels good to them and what feels right to them and what situations they do or do not want to be in. Um, so when my children tell me no, I do. I thank them. I'm like, okay, wonderful. And I say loudly, no, I mean not like loud, but I use the clear language to say things like, oh, you didn't like that? Well, I'm absolutely happy to stop. And I do respect your boundary. Oh my, oh, you set a boundary with me? Great, that's wonderful. Thank you. And not pushing or like trying to get past it or anything, but genuinely, okay, thank you. You set that boundary, and then I step back. And a lot of people fear it's so interesting because I feel like the fears actually get in the way of what's on the other side, because a lot of people fear that if we honor our child's boundary, that like everything falls apart and kids are running in the street completely unchecked and they won't listen to a word we say. But you know what? The truth is, like, I see this over and over again, not only with my own children, but with other people's children and with adults. Like, when we hear somebody, when we acknowledge them and we respect them, they give that back to us. When I say no to my children, they hear that most of the time. Of course, there are moments when they will push, especially, the younger they are, the more they may push back against my boundaries. My boundaries also are not rules. My boundaries pertain to things that feel good or not good to me. So, if like um, a kid was, sitting on my lap and kind of jumping around and squirming a lot, it would be completely reasonable for me to say, hey, that actually kind of hurts. Your bones are digging into my sensitive legs here. And I love that you're sitting on me. And also, could you sit still while we snuggle? And that's a reasonable boundary that has to do with our own comfort levels, our own bodies, the things that we're managing in our lives. Um, other boundaries that and I don't even really call them boundaries. I just, because maybe the word has become synonymous with rules, and maybe just because I don't think we need that extra cumbersome, like, oh, this is a boundary. I mean, sometimes I may ask my kids to do things like, hey, would you mind turning down that volume? I don't really see it as a boundary. I'm not setting a boundary. I'm just engaging with somebody. If I was asking an adult to turn down a volume, I wouldn't in my mind conceptualize it as a boundary. I wouldn't be like, my boundary is that you need to turn down that volume because it's bothering me, right? And so why would I approach talking to my child about an everyday thing like, hey, that volume is a little bit too loud for me, any way differently than I would approach anybody else in the world? Now, what would I do if the volume was too loud? I may ask somebody, hey, would you mind turning that down? I might, if I felt like it wasn't going to like, feel like I was being aggressive or passive aggressive or offensive or anything like that. I might actually just go and turn it down a little bit myself. Um, there could be different ways that I would interact with something like that, but I wouldn't really consider that actually a boundary. That's just interacting with the everyday life. And it's like, I would never set a boundary around somebody brushing their teeth. Like, logically, to me, this doesn't make sense to call it a boundary. Brushing our teeth is one of those everyday life skills that we learn how to navigate. And why would we set a boundary, create a rule and a power struggle and all of this stuff around toothbrushing when, in fact, it's just part of our day to day, and we find ways. as adults and as children to manage our day to day, and we get tools to make it so it works better for us. Some people, they really like schedules that really show them when they're supposed to do it. Other people like routines where they kind of loosely know that, they get up in the morning and they drink some water and then they brush their teeth. And as adults, we have a lot of power around something like brushing our teeth. So we buy the exact right toothpaste and the exact right toothbrush and all of the different products that make us feel comfortable brushing our teeth. And that's the way we engage with brushing our teeth. It's not a boundary. We're not fighting to get this thing done or anything like that. We're just working through an everyday thing. And if we can approach things like that with our children without coming from a power hierarchy of, I'm going to make you brush your teeth. I might do it calmly and gently, but if you don't cooperate, then I'm going to be setting a boundary and we're going to fight about it. Like, you've already lost most of the battle when you go into an everyday action as if you are ready to set up a power struggle and like an unhealthy cycle around toothbrushing. So I feel like this is a topic that I'm going to continue talking about a whole lot. I'm going to address a lot of different aspects of it. The rape culture aspect and the aspect where disrespecting a child's no directly leads them to believing no is not a term worth being respected, and plays into them not actually learning how to interact with somebody else's no, is the angle that I wanted to take today. There's a whole bunch of other nuances and layers to this discussion. Um, the things I was talking about in the beginning about like overriding people and the all of the different ways that mainstream interacts with a child's boundaries actually leads to, on top of what I spoke about today, it also leads to a lot of different things um, as far as like be hindering communication skills. It leads to things such as, obviously disempowerment around boundaries and being able to be ourselves, stand up for ourselves, speak up in situations we want to speak up in. Um, and we are actually ourselves as adults carrying a huge generational trauma and pain around our own abilities and our own past experiences to say no and to interact with the word no and to feel strong and confident when we use that word. So like I said, I'm going to be peeling off the different layers of this discussion over the next couple of weeks. And then think I scheduled it for the 7th. I was going to do it sooner. I was going to do a workshop on boundaries this week. And then I realized as I was moving through the conversation that we were barely on the surface. Like, we can't even get past acknowledging that when a child says no, they're not being defiant. So when I realized how far we had to go with this discussion, I decided to schedule that out and do a whole series of learning posts before we actually get to the workshop so that people are kind of, a little bit more immersed in the idea and have shed the initial like cognitive dissonance to the topic. So the 7th, I believe it's the 7th, is a Saturday, but it's on the calendar in the Skool group. Um, and I'm going to do a whole visual PowerPoint workshop with all of the bullet points, and we're going to work through all of the different ways that um, our lack of understanding around boundaries is really upholding a painful status quo for our society. So it's going to be a lot of fun. And I'm actually really just excited to delve into this topic. So thank you all for being here today. You are also incredibly wonderful. I love seeing your faces. I'm going to shut off the recording and get to the sharing portion of the call. Looks like Amber, you would like to go first. So let me shut this off and you can certainly go first.